I want you to just picture this real quick. It's 1 AM and I'm in the middle of listening to Future and Metro Boomin's new collab album. I'm enjoying it a lot so far. And then all of a sudden on the track Like That, Kendrick Lamar just comes out of nowhere and drops this crazy verse directly dissing both Drake and J. Cole. And this move might have just single-handedly started a hip-hop civil war. So let's break down exactly what Kendrick said first.
Fuck the big three, nigga, it's just big me, nigga, bum!
So the first bar in Kendrick's verse that could be interpreted as a diss comes when he says,
"Say yes, a lot of goofies with a check,"
which is a subliminal diss directly towards Drake. Drake is obviously partnered with Nike, and Nike's logo is a checkmark. Simple enough. But then we get a big one here.
Fuck sneak diss and first person shooter, I hope they came with 3 switches.
A reference to Drake and J. Cole's track First Person Shooter. And while J. Cole took a more civil approach with his reference of the Big Three, Kendrick is clearly out for blood, as he follows up the line with,
"Crash out like fuck rap, this Melly Mel if I had to."
For those who don't know, Melly Mel was the lead vocalist of hip-hop group Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, which is one of the first hip-hop acts ever, starting as far back as 1978, almost 50 years ago now. But despite Melly Mel being an absolute rap legend, Kendrick says he would still diss him if provoked. Quickly firing another shot, Kendrick raps,
"Motherfuck the big three, nigga, it's just big me."
Again dissing Drake and Cole and the idea of the Big Three as the most successful rappers of the 2010s. This is then followed by a ruthless final 4 bars.
And your best work is a light pack, nigga, Prince outlived Mike Jack. Bum! For all your dogs getting buried, that's a K with all these nines, he go see Pet Cemetery.
First there's the Prince and Michael Jackson line, which comes after Drake compared himself to Mike on First Person Shooter after tying his record for the most #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. But by referencing Prince here, Kendrick is essentially saying that while he isn't as commercially successful as Drake as Prince wasn't to Michael, like Prince's music being generally more acclaimed than Mike's, so too is Kendrick's when compared to Drake's. It could also be read as Kendrick flexing that he had the privilege to perform with Prince while he was still alive, versus Drake who had to get a posthumous feature from Michael Jackson for his 2018 album Scorpion. And then of course the final line is a clear allusion to Drake's most recent album, For All the Dogs, followed up with Kendrick saying he's gonna put them in the Pet Cemetery, the infamous graveyard for dogs and other pets from the titular novel by Stephen King. So overall, Kendrick Lamar was fairly ruthless when it came to this verse. A verse that might have just marked the hip-hop equivalent of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand that kicked off World War I. But just, why is that?
I'm usually homeboys with the same niggas I'm rhyming with, but this is hip-hop.
I think for us to really understand why this single verse is so important to current hip-hop, we have to take a look back at Kendrick Lamar's iconic verse on Big Sean's Control. Way back in 2013, a young Kendrick coming off of the success of Good Kid Mad City rapped this on Sean's track.
And that goes for Jamaica, Big Crit Wale, Pusha T, Meek Mills, A$AP Rocky, Drake, Big Sean, J Electron, Tyler McMillan. I got love for you all, but I'm trying to murder you niggas.
This call out by Kendrick would spark outrage in the hip-hop community, as it was essentially Kendrick declaring war on every other rapper in the game, including the rapper who featured him on the song. And to this day, Kendrick's verse on Control still lingers in the hip-hop zeitgeist, especially since he truly backed his words up with one of the greatest 3-album runs of all time. But of course this verse didn't come without responses from the aforementioned rappers, including Drake. Shortly after the song dropped, Drake responded in an interview with Billboard by saying, quote, "I didn't really have anything to say about it. It just sounded like an ambitious thought to me. That's all it was. I know good and well that he's not murdering me at all, in any platform. So when that day presents itself, I guess we can revisit the topic." End quote. This was then followed by a subliminal by Kendrick during a cypher at the 2013 BET Hip Hop Awards.
And nothing been the same since they dropped Control and tucked the sense of the rapper back in his pajama clothes.
Now there is definitely a lot more to Drake and Kendrick's ongoing Cold War of sorts, certainly enough for a video of its own. So I've linked a great video in the top right corner that you can watch if you want something more in depth of the whole beef. In general, since Kendrick's verse on Control, the two have engaged in repeated sneak disses against one another, with nothing really bubbling up besides a passing line or two. Up until now with Kendrick's verse on Like That. While it certainly wasn't as vicious as the Control verse, I still cannot understate how badass of a move this is from Kendrick. To not only diss Drake while he's on retirement no less, and to do it on an album by one Metro Boomin, who himself also has beef with Drake, but also on an album by Future, who by contrast is one of Drake's closest associates in the entire rap game. Like, the amount of chaos he's already stirred up with this verse being out for 24 hours is ridiculous. Plus there's the fact that Kendrick technically also dissed J. Cole as well. Although a lot of the lines directed at him seem to be more out of a place of competition rather than actual bad blood, similar to the verse on Control. Who knows though, maybe Kendrick feels like there's a 2v1 brewing after the release of First Person Shooter. And on that note, let's talk about what this verse actually means going forward. Now first I want to talk about what I think Drake's options are and how likely each possible outcome is. Of course there's the strategy of just not responding at all, which I think is possible considering Drake is supposed to be taking a break from music for the foreseeable future. Although what I think is more likely is that Drake will just start dropping more subliminals towards Kendrick. I mean, after all, Drake has shown these last few years that he really does not want the smoke, especially after Pusha T's brutal diss track back in 2018. But to be honest, I also wouldn't be too surprised if this verse is the straw that breaks the camel's back for Drake, and he comes out with a direct call-out of his own, and maybe even a full-on diss track. Now as for J. Cole, I really have no clue if or how he's gonna respond, since he was definitely more just caught in the crossfire than anything else. But just imagine if Cole and Kendrick start going at each other after this, especially with the feature run Cole's been on as of late. That would be a hip-hop battle for the ages. But truthfully, the person who confuses me the most in this situation is actually Future. Like, he's already been in this really weird spot with Drake and Metro beefing, and with this verse from Kendrick, it's really looking like he's gonna have to pick a side at some point if he hasn't already, which could potentially mean that we might even see a Drake and Future conflict, all things considered. You see what I mean now when I say that this diss could legitimately shake up the state of hip-hop like the Control verse did more than 10 years back? And I would bet you Kendrick's just looking at all of this chaos unfolding right now and just grinning, since the ball's out of his court. It's up to Drake and J. Cole to retaliate now. And one final thing I want to mention for anybody who'd rather see all of this resolved peacefully and sees this escalation by Kendrick as a negative thing, the way I see it at least, as long as this war stays in the music, I'm all for it, since it'll inevitably create more songs, and better songs for that matter. I mean, after all, there's no greater motivator than good competition. Hell, this might even be the kick in the ass Drake needs in order to start putting an effort into his music again to prove to everyone that he's the best. However, I must reiterate again, I only support this battle if it's strictly about the music. As much as I love some beef, people can seriously lose their lives over it if it becomes too personal. It's like when Eminem said when squashing his beef on Like Toy Soldiers.
But don't get it twisted, it's not a plea that I'm copping. I'm just willing to be the bigger man if y'all can quit popping. Off your jaws with a knocking, cause frankly I'm sick of talking. I'm not gonna let someone else's coffin rest on my conscience.
But either way this thing goes, I think it's safe to say that a hip-hop civil war is brewing. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Kendrick dissing Drake and J. Cole. If you enjoyed, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment telling me what you think about this whole situation and what's going to happen in the future. And also just a reminder that if you'd like to support the channel, you can now become a member and get early access to videos as well as a special shout out from me. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching!